in the heart of the 12th century, amidst the turmoil of the Crusades. One name echoed from the deserts of the Middle East to the royal courts of Europe: Saladin. But who was this man, this Sultan, who would face down the legendary Richard the Lionheart and change the course of history? He wasn't just a warrior. He was a unifier, a strategist, and a figure so respected that even his enemies wrote of his honor. This is the story of how a Kurdish officer rose to unite a fractured Muslim world, recaptured the holy city of Jerusalem, and forge a legacy of chivalry in an age of brutal holy war. Our story begins, not on a battlefield, but in the complex political landscape of the 12th century Middle East. The once mighty Abbasid and Fatimid caliphates were shadows of their former selves, and the region was a patchwork of rival Muslim states. The Crusader kingdoms, established decades earlier, clung to the coastline, a constant threat. Into this chaos stepped Salah al-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, or Saladin. Born in 1137 in Tikrit, modern-day Iraq, he wasn't born into royalty. He learned his craft under his uncle Shirkuh, a general for the powerful Zengid dynasty. Saladin's early campaigns in Egypt were a masterclass in political and military maneuvering. Sent to secure the Nile Valley, he not only repelled Crusader invasions, but also outwitted his rivals. In 1171, he made a pivotal move. He abolished the Fatimid Caliphate in Cairo, bringing Egypt back under the spiritual authority of the Abbasid Caliph in Baghdad, and, more importantly, under his own direct control. He was now the Sultan of Egypt, but his ambition was far greater. He saw a divided Islamic world as the core weakness against the Crusaders. His mission became one of unification. Over the next decade, he tirelessly campaigned, using a mix of diplomacy and force to bring Syria, northern Iraq, and other territories under his Ayyubid dynasty. He was forging an empire strong enough to confront the Kingdom of Jerusalem head-on. The year is 1187, the Crusader states. Arrogant and overconfident, after a series of provocations, muster their largest army ever. They march out to confront Saladin near the Sea of Galilee, at a place marked by two hills known as the Horns of Hattin. What followed was not just a battle, it was a strategic masterpiece. Saladin's genius was in choosing the time and place. He drew the heavily armored Crusader knights into an arid, waterless plain under the blistering July sun. His light cavalry harassed their columns, setting fires to the dry grass to choke them with smoke. Thirsty, exhausted, and demoralized, the Crusader army was encircled. The Battle of Hattin was an unmitigated disaster for the Crusaders. Their army was annihilated. King Guy of Jerusalem and many high-ranking nobles, including the infamous Reynold of Chatillon, were captured. The True Cross, the most sacred relic of the Crusader kingdom, fell into Saladin's hands. With the main Christian army destroyed, the path to Jerusalem was wide open. The victory at Hattin sent shockwaves across the world, signaling a monumental shift in power. For Saladin, it was the culmination of 2 decades of work, the moment that his unified empire could finally achieve its ultimate goal. Following the decisive victory at Hattin, city after city fell to Saladin's forces. Acre, Sidon, Beirut, the coastal strongholds of the Crusaders, capitulated. Soon, only one prize remained: Jerusalem. The city had been in Christian hands for 88 years, ever since the First Crusade had captured it in a brutal massacre. Now, Saladin stood at its gates. The defenders, led by Balian of Ibelin, prepared for a desperate siege. They knew the history. They expected a bloodbath, a revenge for the slaughter of 1099. But Saladin was a different kind of conqueror. After a brief but intense siege, Balian negotiated a surrender. And here Saladin's character truly shone. Instead of sacking the city and slaughtering its inhabitants, he offered remarkably merciful terms. For a small ransom, the Christians of Jerusalem were allowed to leave peacefully, taking their possessions with them. He even provided guards to escort them safely to the coast. For those who couldn't pay, Saladin and his brother paid the ransom themselves, or simply let them go. He protected the city's holy sites, including the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This act of clemency stood in stark, stunning contrast to the brutality of the First Crusade, and cemented Saladin's reputation for justice and generosity, a reputation that even Christian chroniclers had to acknowledge. The fall of Jerusalem horrified Europe. It sparked an immediate and massive response, the Third Crusade, the Crusade of Kings. The most formidable of these kings was Richard I of England, known as the Lionheart. This set the stage for one of history's most famous rivalries. Richard was a brilliant, ferocious warrior. Saladin was a patient, calculating strategist. For 2 years, these two titans clashed across the Holy Land. Richard arrived and managed to recapture the vital port city of Acre after a long and grueling siege. It was a major victory for the Crusaders. Yet, despite his battlefield prowess, Richard could never land a decisive blow against Saladin. He marched on Jerusalem twice, but was forced to turn back both times. Saladin's scorched earth tactics, his harassment of Richard's supply lines, and the sheer resilience of his army meant that while Richard could win battles, he couldn't win the war. The conflict was punctuated by moments of surprising mutual respect. Legend tells of Saladin sending fresh fruit and snow to cool Richard's fever, and Richard offering praise for the Sultan's knightly bearing. They were enemies locked in a holy war, but they recognized the skill and stature of their opponent. Finally, in 1192, with both sides exhausted, Richard and Saladin agreed to a truce. The Treaty of Jaffa was a compromise. The Crusaders would keep a narrow strip of coastline from Tyre to Jaffa, but Jerusalem would remain under Muslim control. However, the treaty guaranteed that unarmed Christian pilgrims would have free and safe access to the city as holy sites. It was a pragmatic end to a brutal conflict. Richard the Lionheart sailed for home, having failed to retake Jerusalem. Saladin, the Unifier of Islam, had successfully defended it. Less than a year after Richard's departure, in March of 1193, Saladin fell ill and died in his beloved city of Damascus. When his treasury was opened, his family was shocked to find there was almost no money left. He had given it all away to his soldiers, to the poor, to civic projects. He died a powerful sultan who possessed the wealth of a pauper. His legacy, however, was immeasurable. He had successfully unified the fragmented Muslim states, pushed back the Crusader tide, and retaken Jerusalem. But more than that, he left behind a memory of leadership defined, not just by military might, but by justice, mercy, and honor. He was a figure praised in the histories of both his friends and his foes, a warrior sultan who became a global symbol of chivalry. The story of Saladin is a powerful reminder that history is never just black and white. He was a devout Muslim fighting a holy war, but also a leader whose compassion became legendary. He teaches us that even in the most divided of times, qualities like honor and magnanimity can shine through and be remembered for centuries. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the life of Saladin. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe to Historical Figures and Moments for more balanced looks at history's most compelling characters. And speaking of our channel, we are built by a community of history lovers. If you have a passion for research, writing, or video production, and want to be part of making these documentaries, I would be honored to hear from you. We are looking for volunteers to join our team. Please send your CV to start19951995@gmail.com and tell me a bit about your passion for history. Let's make something great together. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.